Please welcome the President and Editor-in-Chief of the Huffington Post and the moderator of today's plenary, Arianna Huffington. And joining her on the panel is the founding co-president of Terraform One, Maria Ayalova, the first Chief Technology Officer of the United States, Anish Chopra, the head of corporate social innovation and philanthropy at Twitter, Claire Diaz-Ortiz. And finally, the founder and honorable chief executive of the Hong Kong Institute of Contemporary Culture, Ada Wong.
Well, thank you so much for staying with us. I've heard what a fabulous day you've already had. And I'm really excited to be here with a very distinguished group of panelists to be your closing act, especially on a subject which is so incredibly important. We're talking earlier about how key it is to take inventions and turn them into innovations that can affect not just those immediately impacted, but the whole world, especially the world that most needs our help right now. And we have an amazing group of panelists to address this, both to talk about the specific inventions and to talk about the impact that they can have around the world. And also, I'm really excited that women are outnumbering the men in the panel.
You're thrilled by that also.
That doesn't happen often. And of course, that the man has also been described as the Indian George Clooney.
Oh,
right?
no.
So let me just start with a general question. And then I would love if you, in the process of answering it, talk about the specific way in which you are influencing the transmission of the inventions you've been working with or that you know about into the third world. So how much of putting technology in the hands of the poor is about disrupting the way we are doing things? How much, for example, is it about the price point? How much is it about establishing different goals for inventions than the traditional ones? And do you understand?
Yes, I do. Well, I can speak about access to education as connected to technology. And one example is Mitx, and more recently what was announced, edX, the initiative between Harvard and MIT. So they put all their coursework online, and it's available to anyone around the world who has access to a computer and an internet connection. And I believe that's disruptive, and that will change the world. When MITx announced their first course this spring on circuits and electronics, 120,000 people from around the world took the course. People from Cairo and Bangladesh and all these countries met in coffee shops and had study sessions. This is more than how many there are living alumni today of MIT. So I think that proves the point.
And it's particularly important when we look at what's happening with student debt in this country, which has now reached $1 trillion and is higher than credit card debt. So this is truly disruptive.
I might say, Arianna, a bit about the power of data in addition to the notion of technology in the hands of people. Because data, I believe, is actually one of the key enablers for innovation and liberation for people all over the world. In November of 2010, President Obama visited India. And we, because of the schedule, only visited the urban communities in India. So we were on the college campus of St. Xavier's, and the president chose to want to understand how democracy was changing in India, powered by technology, and in this case, data. So the president made arrangements to visit with a village in the Ajmer district of Rajasthan. No indoor plumbing, no paved roads, no what I would consider to be traditional models of infrastructure, yet they had basically fiber broadband to the government center and a 4G WiMAX tower on top to broadcast wireless broadband for the village. And by the way, better communications than in most of the infrastructure for communities at the time in the United States. We hadn't had our 4G rollout. And the president communicated via high definition broadband to these villagers who shared their stories about what happened in the 3 months when they were capable of communicating in new ways. I'll just share one story and the implications that it had. A gentleman stood up. This was not really scripted that well. It was just telling their stories, and he said, kind of an awkward story. He was a farmer, and he was looking for financing to buy seeds so that he could build his crops. And you need to prove that you own your land, a title to your land, that you could go to the bank and say, can I borrow money for the seeds? And he was describing in an uncomfortable way that in previous years, he would go to the government office to ask for a copy of his land records, and for whatever reason, he couldn't get them. So he would go to what you would call today, money lenders or kind of the secondary market of finance, and he would pay very high rates of interest in order to finance the farming. This year, because of the communications, he could literally connect and download his land records from the village center, and that was enough to get low-cost, reasonable rate loans, and so he could finance without having to put his family's income at risk. And the president's just listening to this story, and he says, in a nutshell, what we're observing here is a leapfrog. For oftentimes in technology, it's, we've invented something amazing in the United States or the West, and over time we reach scale production, and then it becomes cheap enough and we can bring it to other parts of the world. In this example, what the president was describing were the applications that were being built, born on data, made available to the people in Ajmer district, was a leapfrog on our United States domestic infrastructure, which is still very heavily reliant on paper in our government. We have a lot of paper records. So I think, Arianna, the answer is if data is the question, empowering people with information, we will figure out the right technology modality. In this case, it's one computer in the village center. There will be smartphones and other devices that will make that even cheaper. And it might even be, in the case of India, where the data is translated into literally chalk, where they would write on the wall how much money was going to which person on a given employment guarantee program for transparency's sake. So it starts electronic and becomes chalk on a wall. I think this is a bit about what we're seeing in this question of globalization of technology. If you start with frugality in mind and you understand the importance of data more than the widget, you can start to see tremendous impacts, not just in India, but all over the world. And you're seeing that now. 40-plus countries have signed on to the International Open Government Partnership, which takes this commitment to government opening up data and has really taken it around the world. So we're starting to see this invention, which is an opening up of government, be scaled because of the importance of data and the ability to distribute in new markets.
That's very exciting. And Claire, you represent here both the corporate world and the social media world.
Absolutely. So, since I work at Twitter, I obviously have a passionate belief in the power of open information to create change. But in answer to this question, I really think what we need to remember is that it's all about access. And when I talk about access and when I talk about who should have access and how we can get everyone access, I like to share kind of a personal story of my own experience with access. And this goes back to in 2006, I lived in an orphanage in Kenya, and that's where I met my son. My son is a teenager. He just graduated from high school in the US. I know it's strange. We're only 12 years apart. It looks weird. In any case, he has an incredible story of the way that access really changed his life. When he was 4, his parents were passed away due to the HIV/AIDS epidemic. He was in rural Kenya, but he had this real fascination with mobile phones. And there were some folks in his area, in his town, that were getting mobile phones, and he started to get really interested in this. But he couldn't really access that passion or do anything with it. At the age of 11, he was saved by a local orphanage, and the orphanage had a computer room. And by the time I met him, he was 12, and he'd been spending about an hour a week in this computer room. An hour a week for an 11-year-old is very little, but he was still able to do things that even I couldn't do with my computer, fix my USB dongle when it wasn't working and things like this. And I was immediately able to see, this is interesting. You're seeing this progress. A kid with technological passion, then he gets some computer access. over time, I lived with him in that orphanage for 2 years. We started blogging. He started tweeting, all kinds of things. And the learning curve went crazy. And by the time he then moved to the US and now he's graduated from high school here, he knows everything about technology and has a passion about extending it to kids like himself. So, next year he'll be doing a service program in South America, basically teaching other kids who grew up in situations like himself to really use technology. And for me, this is just a story of access. And there are incredible stories like this all over the world. But the technology, the platform, it can exist. But unless someone has access to use it, it won't mean anything.
I feel you're bearing the lead. You lived for 2 years in an orphanage in Kenya, and then you adopted it. I mean, don't you all want to know a little more about it?
Yeah.
Please tell us a little bit more.
A little bit more. He is an amazing kid, and we connected very well. The first day I met him, he told me, Barack Obama will be your leader. And I said, you're a punk. You're a 12-year-old AIDS orphan in Kenya, and Barack Obama's just a senator. What do you know? But look, Barack Obama became my leader. Wow.
What is he saying? What is he saying about the next election?
I know.
He's better than in trade.
I'd love to know how you see disruption and what form of disruption as being particularly important in having all these inventions have a real impact in the third world.
Well, Arianna, I think I come all over from Hong Kong and from Asia. It took 16 hours to come here. And I must say that technology must be really for the benefit of the majority and not the minority. Yes, it is true that in Asia we have this mobile technology. 2 billion people have mobile phones. But I also hope that apart from mobile phones, they can also have clean water. They can also have affordable housing, as well as sanitary toilets. So I hope that they can do their computing in better facilities. I also think that technology is not everything. And in education, for example, because I come from an education background, it is one thing to have these cheap tablets giving to school children, like what the Indian government is doing. They are doing these, $50 tablets for 200 million kids, and I think that's remarkable. But, at the same time, we cannot do without teachers. I know that tonight we are honoring a very visionary teacher, so I think that it is always important to keep this in mind. Technology is one thing, but to have the educational innovation and the social innovation is equally important.
And yeah, I got some of the notes of what was discussed earlier, and I understand that Limor talked about how it's possible to be both a good cause and a good business. And after all, if we're going to scale a lot of these inventions, we need this kind of partnerships, public-private partnerships, and also the recognition by corporations that they can be a good business too. And actually, your chief revenue officer, I was on a panel with him recently, and when people asked him, how do you monetize Twitter? He said 3 things: humor, huge deals, and humanity.
Right.
And this is the humanity part. So whoever wants to take it, how do you see that prioritizing of doing good in a business at the same time being good for the bottom line? How do we see that spreading?
It's not going to work unless it is good for the bottom line. And there's something that Dick Costolo is the CEO of Twitter, and when people ask him, what place does your drive for revenue hold and your interest in making this a global company? And he says, to us, to Twitter, revenue is like oxygen. We need it, but it's not what drives us. What drives us is making a difference in people's worlds. And those can be people here in this room with all the latest iPhones on the planet, or those can be people with old Sonys back in India or something. So, I mean, essentially what we're looking for is ways to make change in people's lives, whether it's in for-profit or in nonprofit sectors, and that's going to catalyze.
I may, Arianna, say that sometimes these can be part of the same negotiation or agreement. So let me just share one little vignette about the President's Veterans Job Bank to give you a flavor for how doing good and bottom line can collaborate in the same way. In August of 2011, the President announced that about 100,000 Americans were going to come home from Iraq and Afghanistan, and that, unfortunately, the statistics were such that the unemployment rate for young men who'd served in the military actually was higher than the peer group resident in the United States. And so he issued this challenge. He said to the employers of America, we'd like you to reach out and hire a veteran. In fact, he called on Congress to pass some legislation to actually create some incentives in this area, which they did. But the broader point was really an information problem. How will a veteran know that there's an employer out there who's proactively trying to find them? And one model was the government could create some big Uber database and make every employer in the world or the country deposit the listings that are associated with veteran employment hiring. You could imagine how terrible that would actually end up being. The interface would stink. It'd be built late, over budget. Wouldn't be in time. So we had to come up with an alternative. And this is where the doing good and the bottom line and the benefits came in. Turns out that the internet ecosystem had not yet congealed around standards for how job postings should be conveyed on the internet. There had been no metadata standards, to be kind of geeky for a moment, so that a job posting on the internet could be discovered in the same way. Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo formed a nonprofit coalition called schema.org. One phone call to the group in August led to, well, if you give us a draft version of the job posting schema, we could put it through our review. So my intern, very honestly, unpaid intern, wrote the first version of the job posting schema. You could see it at schema.org/job posting. We then presented it to CEOs from the big job boards companies, and within a month and a half, they kind of voluntarily agreed, because it was in their interest to get the industry to agree to standards to make this information more discoverable. It just happened to include a message, if you wanted to hire veterans, write the word vet commit, but it could have been open for any other purpose, regular job postings, other things. So by the time the president announced on Veterans Day, basically the week of Veterans Day, which was November, 3 months from the day he made the announcement, we had 800,000 employers who had voluntarily tagged jobs through this schema.org collaboration. No one paid a nickel, all free, all whatever. That very weekend, LinkedIn sponsored a Veterans Hack Day. No one asked them to, I guess we asked them to do this, but no one forced them to do this. There was no you must pay something. They just did it, and over the course of a weekend, they built 44 applications to help veterans now find the data built by the schema. And I'll just share you an example of what came out of this. This is what it now looks like for free for veterans thanks to LinkedIn. They waived all their premium account fees. You discharge from the military and you have a military resume, what's called MOS codes. You upload that to LinkedIn, and it has access to a government database to translate what is the civilian equivalent of that military occupation. It then matches that against the LinkedIn database of civilian skills and asks you to build your profile based on what you learned in the military. It then looks for job listings from employers looking for military veterans based on those who have similar skills, and then finds the veteran at those employers and offers this other veteran who wants the job free email connection to the individual at the employer with the job opening in an area that's related to them. The whole thing was built in a weekend for free and is widely available for everybody, and it's on their LinkedIn Labs website where they put all their cool hacks. No one got paid a nickel, but we had Dr. Jill Biden come out and say thank you to LinkedIn and about a dozen other app developers who built similar tools. And we visited San Francisco in February at the Code for America offices. So there was an improvement to their bottom line because we've now got a standard for job postings that could be used more generally in the commercial sector. And there are folks that can build very low friction, these apps that could take advantage. And I think that is part of the trade. Let's come up with voluntary consensus standards activities. The government, in this case, was a convener. And then let's put this to work to solve a problem, in this case, helping veterans find jobs. And I think that formula can play in a number of settings.
Well, that is an incredibly inspiring story. And what is surprising is that just looking by the reaction in the room, most people didn't know about it. Am I right? No, this is a very well-informed group.
Seriously? We had a whole Rose Garden ceremony. President, gave a speech. Really?
So, it just identifies one of the problems we're facing, which is how do we put the spotlight on things that are working? There is and I, as a member of the media, share a responsibility here, because we in the media have a tendency to put the spotlight on what is not working, to focus on our deficits, our unemployment crisis, all very legitimate problems. But by not putting the spotlight on what is working, we are missing a huge opportunity to take something that would make us optimistic about how we can solve problems. And especially given that there are 3.7 million job openings that are not filled because of a skills gap. So what you are saying is a way to help connect people with jobs they can actually fill. So how, Claire, do you see social media perhaps helping both convey the information and close some of these gaps?
Sure. I mean, one of my favorite stories of someone turning news into a positive story for how people are changing things is, I know you know David Bornstein, who is the New York Times bestselling author of How to Change the World, and he has a column in the New York Times called the Fix It column. And it's just an amazing attempt to basically show what kind of positive social entrepreneurship and positive nonprofit work in the country is really happening, and obviously all within this guise of Fix It, right? You immediately know that you're going to hear a story that might compel you to either make change or encourage someone you know to make change, or you're going to be reading about a story about someone who was able to really affect change. And obviously the Huffington Post Impact section does the same thing. But in social media, I think that's the key, is what we're trying to look for, is making sure that we're not just sharing stories, but we're making sure that we're actually calling people to action and finding ways to do that. And so for me, that's always kind of in the forefront of my mind.
And Ananda, in what you're doing in Hong Kong with the MAD, Make a Difference Foundation, you are actually taking young people and teaching them innovation and social entrepreneurship. And we'd love to hear some stories about how it has worked, some examples that can inspire others.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Yes, I started a platform called MAD. It's an innovation platform. Every year 1,200 young people gather together. They come from 70 different cities of Asia and all corners of China. They're very creative and innovative. I hope they can also be empathetic to understand social issues and to try to find different solutions to tackle them. So they come from a cross-disciplinary background. And for 3 days, they gather together. They listen to inspiring talks. They do workshops. And at the end of the 3 days, there are lots of ideas. And we pick up some of the ideas and we incubate them. So we are into our 3rd year. And I think this has become a very powerful network and platform for Asian young change makers. And I must say, though, technological innovation have not really been a big part of it. Yes, there has been a few groups who have modeled their social projects like the Khan Academy. So they have 1-minute classrooms where they do videos of different lessons in Chinese and for the remote areas of China. That was done very, very easily. But I think, more importantly, I see the importance of cultural innovation. For example, a group of young people from Taiwan went to the poorest region of Taiwan, and together they worked with the community there, which was full of Aborigines. They made the Aborigines feel proud of themselves, and they built cultural venues for them, and they developed a bottom-up strategy for sustainable development in tourism. So in a way, they are empowering a community to act, and the community is actually stronger because of that. And I see the power of this cultural innovation as I see it.
And you've also said that Hong Kong does not have a culture of innovation, that you're good at the trade and finance, but not innovation.
That's right.
How did you come up with this?
I'm just a very disruptive person. I like doing things that are different. I think, Hong Kong is very boring. We talk about finances all the time. But in fact, we are very open and free. And this is very special in Asia. Mind you, Twitter is not accessible in China. But we can have Twitter in Hong Kong. And Facebook is not accessible in China. But we really do a lot of Facebook in Hong Kong. So, with Hong Kong being a very free sort of window, we really want to make the best of it. And I can see that, for this younger generation, whether they live in mainland China or Taiwan or elsewhere in Asia, I think they have one thing in common, and I think it's because of all this technology, they are more connected, and they really want to make a difference. They want to be social leaders, and they want to be change makers.
So Maria, how can we more easily identify private sector innovations that can actually impact people's lives?
Well, as I said before, I think our focus is on education, and we are trying to create a realm that is completely interdisciplinary. So by bringing people from different disciplines and educating them how to cross these borders, I think that makes them capable to then address the larger issues. We actually just launched, we have a school at Terraform One called One Lab, and we are developing a new curriculum which we call the Urban Year. And the idea is to educate these urban pioneers that will be able to regenerate and sustain the future urban realm. And I think by grouping people together around an issue rather than around a discipline, and giving them all the tools and knowledge, and bring them from around the world, and then sending them back with these tools and knowledge, they'll have the know-how to address these problems and provide solutions.
And do you have an example of something that has worked?
We keep in touch with the community of students. For the first couple of years, the school was based about urban agriculture. So we had people come and then come with these innovations. There was a group from Chicago that developed this small mobile farm that can be implemented in a very dense urban area and moved around to follow the sun. So they went back to form a nonprofit organization in Chicago, teaching the underprivileged community that doesn't have access to fresh produce how to grow food right in middle of the city. Another student from Spain, we worked with phytoremediation cells, and he went back and worked with small villages to in Northern Africa of how to purify water using plants. So our idea is we have a laboratory, we train people, they then come, and when they come, and they then go and take the innovations, take it further, develop it in a specific place.
You know, what is interesting is that we are emphasizing how these innovations can help people in the Third World War, but what is interesting now is that, of course, they can come back and help us here.
Yes.
I mean, I think what you are saying about urban agriculture.
Well, there's another example of this. You know, in the United States, we've put a lot of attention on providing doctors and hospitals with electronic medical records, electronic health records, and that's been a big thrust of our broader health agenda. Yet there had been a startup in the United States called Voxiva that had been piloting the use of cell phones in Africa to communicate to pregnant mothers how they can basically remain healthy during the pregnancy because of the challenges of preterm birth and infant mortality. Now, I'm a Virginian. Virginia actually happens to have one of the worst infant mortality rates, completely off the scales relative to its wealth. And so one of the fascinating circumstances is what you just mentioned, Arianna, the reverse innovation. Johnson & Johnson and a network of other corporate philanthropies came together with the Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies Coalition, and I had the pleasure from my mantle at the White House. Again, we didn't spend any money. We simply celebrated the launch of this reverse innovation of an Africa-tested mobile pilot, Text for Baby, to see whether it would have domestic effect in the United States. And Virginia was the first community where this was piloted. We have over 250,000 moms have enrolled for free. They get what happens is they enter in their due date, and they get 3 relevant health messages a week based on where they are in their pregnancy, so that they can be reminded to go see the doctor for prenatal care, to eat right at the right moments, and so forth. And GW right now is actively studying this as a research base to see what effect this will have for those women. But the point is, this is not an American invention that we've imposed elsewhere around the world. This is an idea that was piloted in Africa that showed promise and is now being reverse delivered here into the United States. And it's exciting. The potential for these kinds of global collaborations are limitless. I mean, I think you'll see breakthroughs in telemedicine overseas that might then have reverse effect. You'll see the same in personalized learning. You know, if you talk to India, they'll say, we can't scale up at the US rate of teacher and building to student. We can't build that many schools for the students that were coming up. So they're going to have to find new ways. And I would imagine that software-driven personalized learning will be part of the mix. And it may be, they'll be. I talk to startups in America in health, energy, and education. And they tell me, education in particular, their first dollar of revenue is overseas because their pilot and beta customers are hungry for these breakthroughs, and they're hungrier overseas, and in a sense, they'll scale back to the US. So I think there's going to be a lot more of this reverse flow of innovation over the next coming years, and it's a great story for the world.
I mean, ideas come from anywhere, and it is our job when we are in a position of privilege to allow those ideas to flow better from other places on the globe.
And you've also said something which I love, Claire. Yeah, and I'll quote you. You said that the men and women who sit next to you on this panel or at a coffee house are your potential partners, collaborators, and inspirations. Connecting with these individuals is the key to the week in front of you. If you let them, they will change your life. So as you look around you to Ada and Anish and Maria, and me, how can we change your life?
You've got to listen. And I think if you're talking about social media in particular, that's the one tip that people forget to do and forget to implement in your life. You know, social media, our connected lives are not just here so that we can blast out our thoughts all the time. They're here so that we can listen and hear and engage, because ultimately it is through this open exchange of information that our lives will transform and that we will all transform the world. But we need to hear what people are saying.
Well, sometimes you don't need social media to listen. I've got this story about homeless SMS. So, you know, like the maternal mothers, you know, this young chap wants to help street sleepers. And what he did was he spent months on the streets talking to them and listening to them and understanding their stories. And then he realized that most of these street sleepers actually have low-end cell phones. But they are not aware of, you know, all the government services and, you know, provisions for them. Mm-hmm. So he, together with a team of volunteers, he started this homeless SMS service with a good morning greeting. Hi, good morning. You know, so this street sleeper, you know, whenever there's a question, so there's a two-way communication channel, you know, send an SMS to him asking a question, and then the volunteers responded. So, so I think this is a fantastic story of social innovation. But I think the starting point is really, you know, listening and understanding the issues and understanding the social problems involved.
May I piggyback on this homeless piece just for a moment? Because it does connect to government as well. This is something we didn't even realize. One of the president's members of the White House Council on Community Solutions is the musician John Bon Jovi. And he runs a homeless restaurant, basically. It's called the Soul Kitchen. And it basically is pay whatever you can afford.
Right.
And his staff had this problem. For the folks who are participating in the meal, the staff doesn't know where they will sleep at night. And the question was, what information sources might be available? The analogy in my head was, you know, why isn't there an open table for homeless services? So this is the question that John asked. How hard is it for us to figure out a way to get information into the hands of those who are trying to provide support services to the homeless? Now, here's the interesting story. In the story that she just mentioned, it was direct. Your entrepreneur direct to the homeless, the individuals in question. It turns out our federal government asks the homeless shelters every day to report their bed availability for purposes of a compliance or something. I don't know, it was called HMIS, the Housing Management Information Systems or whatever. But it was always pointed inward. That is, that the homeless shelters would tell the government, you know, their status. I guess for whatever reason, I'm sure there's very important reasons, and it's written in some regulation. So Secretary Sean Donovan said, he's the HUD secretary, he says, whoa, why is this not facing outward? if the data is available, why wouldn't we just point the hose out, not in? So in less than 90 days, with like no major engineering coup, by flipping this internal data into external, there are now 5 apps that are being piloted in his Soul Kitchen this summer in less than 90 days to demonstrate how easy it is to connect those individuals to the services that they need without some unbelievably complicated new programming or what have you. So it's a social entrepreneur, in this case John and his team and your gentleman, but you combine it with this asset, government data, and you can see all the more opportunity for scale and impact. And that's why the international open government piece is so interesting. But I don't know if Hong Kong has signed, I don't know how you participate in international open government or if they could, but they might ask the question in their country, what are our homeless systems and do we have the ability to report back where the nearest health facility might be or where the nearest learning facility might be? And that could complement what this social entrepreneur is doing.
Yeah, I think that could be done. I'm not sure what Hong Kong is. Well, our government is certainly not very open. So, you know, I hope they will be more open in the future. It's certainly not a full democracy yet.
So, you know, we have less than 10 minutes left and a great audience. So I would love to bring you in and see if you have any questions of our panelists. While you're thinking, please raise your hand if you do. I would like to ask you, Anish, you've been in government, you've been out of government. You've been trying to achieve a lot of similar things. You're passionate, you're empathetic, you're brilliant. No. What is better? You know, where have you been more effective? I didn't say he was handsome, right?
No.
What has been, where do you feel you've had the most impact?
Well, when you
Don't tell me both. You have to choose.
No. I think the public sector experience has been the most both rewarding on a personal level and I think impactful. I mean, it starts with leadership, and I don't mean this to be a commercial for President Obama, but I do mean this from the bottom of his heart. He cares deeply about this concept of bottom-up change, and he basically acknowledged that the tools we have today that make our social lives fun, access to Twitter and Facebook and other tools, if we apply them in these areas of providing the kind of support services, it's not a very expensive thing to do, but it's a focus and an effort thing. When you have the president's focus and support, it's really easy to move the agencies. And you find that there are literally, we have this initiative in the VA, the Veterans Affairs Department, over 100,000 employees participated in an online crowdsourcing. How do we help veterans find jobs, get their benefits, figure out their health care? Because the president basically said, I want the employees to feel empowered to make a difference. And the reality is in the public sector, I spent nearly 10 years at a company that had gone public, and it's very successful. I'm back there now as an advisor at the advisory board. Incredibly talented people. The public servants that I'd worked with, both at the state level and in the White House and at the agency level, there are some of the most talented and passionate people on the planet. But in the past, they were told the only way they deliver output is if Congress takes some kind of action on their authorizing legislation or they get a budget change. But this data concept allows them to engage in making a difference in ways that didn't require that kind of permissioning structure. So agricultural employees are opening up data on food deserts in America. So that urban agriculture thing you were talking about, we can map it to say where's the food desert that needs the thing. Because employees said, let's just do it. I think the public sector is as entrepreneurial as I've ever seen it if given the right venue to engage. And that's why I really, really enjoyed my tenure in public life. And I hope you'll see more of this in the agencies around the world, that people feel like they're mission-oriented and they want to make a difference.
Who has a question? Yes.
Hi, Farah Mohammed. I created something called the Girls 20 Summit, and we grapple with this issue of innovation, technological versus social. And we spoke a little bit about it today, just before this panel. And for me, it's like the chicken and the egg situation, right? Which one should come first? I wonder if, just very quickly, for each of the panelists, including you, please, if you wouldn't mind, when you're talking about social innovation versus technological innovation, and you said something key, access. Today's theme is access, technology, and the poor. And we can talk about great technologies, but access for the poor is a huge issue. I wonder if you might all comment on, great innovations, but in terms of really digging to the group where the Rockefeller would like us to go, let's talk about access for the poor when it comes to all of these innovations, whether it be social innovations or technological innovations.
Who wants to take it first?
So I'm not quite clear on the exact question, but essentially you're just wondering how you go about it, social innovation first versus technological innovation, and when you're trying to access.
Yeah, I mean, you said it yourself in some ways that you can have great technology, but if you don't have access to it, it's just technology.
Right.
And for us at the Girls 20 Summit, we have these amazing young women come together from 20 different countries, and they come up with great ideas. Our idea is to say, look, if you've got this great idea, how does it actually impact a mass number of people? So I just would like to have an idea from each of you on whether or not, for you, what's been more, maybe better question is, what's been better, social innovation or innovation in terms of technological changes? Sorry, it's a big question. It just...
Well, let me try. I think technological innovations must have a social side to it, must have social applications. I've seen, great innovations combining, the social element, the technological element, and with a big dose of empathy. So take some products, for example. I don't know whether you've heard of Embrace. This is a sleeping bag for small infants. It is very useful in resource-constrained areas because it'll be cold and difficult to keep the babies warm. And these pouches cost less than $25, and they are very, very impactful. They have saved millions of lives. So if you look at this example and many, many others, I hope that we can find more technologies that can impact the 99%. And not just benefit that 1%. And I think there are lots of great examples out there.
I just wanted to add that access to education, it's very important. And then what we see now happening, the whole environment is changing, that if you want a new job, you don't have to go back to school. There is bite-sized education, peer-to-peer learning, and I think the technology is enabling that. And then there was a lot of talk in a previous session about how do we recognize that, how we recognize skills and achievement. And then this idea of badging, and Mozilla is developing the open badges system where you record all your achievements, you have recommendations from peers, and that's how you'll find new jobs and we'll put you on track. And I think we'll see a really big change in how people package their skills, how they lead them to new jobs through these disruptive innovations.
I'm really interested that we've talked a lot, both Anish and Maria, about how to use technological innovations to help people find jobs, which is a major crisis, of course, that we are facing. And I know Judith and I and LinkedIn and the Amelia Foundation are working together around the conventions to actually use the moment, because I think there is something about using moments where you have the nation's attention, plus 15,000 credentialed media at each convention, to say, what can we do together, leaving government aside, because nothing much is going to be done by government, at least until there is a new administration, and who knows if then, to see what can people do, not-for-profits, corporations, foundations, to jumpstart job creation by using all these innovations. So I'd love anyone who has any ideas here to let me know, as I don't feel we can wait indefinitely. And the great thing about this panel, and unfortunately I have a big zero facing me here, which means no more time, is that it certainly has made me incredibly optimistic, because we are every day confronted with our deficits, our lack, our challenges, and everybody on this panel is dealing with solutions and implementing solutions and helping spread them. So I just want to thank you so much for what you're doing and for your willingness to be here and spread a message of optimism and solutions. And thank you so much for having us and for listening.